The quadratic formula, Algebra 2 trigonometry regions. The previous lesson we learned about the process for completing the square. And in that process we got answers that looked kind of like this type of stuff. And I mentioned in the beginning of that video that there are other options on how to solve that. I mean, the whole reason why we have these procedures is because when you have a quadratic you need to solve, x squared minus 2x plus 7, something like that. Before this chapter, what we would do is we would factor it and we would solve it. But we're learning that not all of them can be factored. They don't always have rational solutions. Sometimes they have irrational solutions. Sometimes they have imaginary solutions. And so we need procedures to find out what those irrational solutions are. And so completing the square is one of the ways that we do that. The other is the quadratic formula. And the quadratic formula is a formula. Completing the square is a process. And so it's really more of a procedure to learn. The quadratic formula is just memorize a formula, plug it in, plug the numbers in, and go from there. And so this first question, this number 1, this is just asking you what the quadratic formula basically is. Instead of a trinomial with numbers for 2x squared plus 3x minus 7, they're just giving them a, b, and c, and we know that that number there would be a, and this number would be b, and this number would be c. And so the quadratic formula goes x equals, because remember we're solving for x, so it makes sense that it's x equals negative b plus or minus, and remember part of completing the square, we always ended up with a plus or minus in front of a radical often, the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. This is the quadratic formula. And it's really important that you basically just memorize this formula. At quick glance, when you first see it, students often worry, like, that is a ridiculous formula, and it is pretty ugly looking to begin with. But after you use it a couple of times, it's really not that bad. I mean, the only super complicated part to it would be the b squared minus 4ac part. And in fact, this b squared minus 4ac term has a special name. It's called the discriminant, and that's actually what the next video is on, and that's going to be about this specific part of the quadratic formula. But anyways, this quadratic formula is just something that has to be memorized. And so I'm going to write it down next to every problem that we do, and I suggest you do the same just out of practice. So for this first one, the roots of the equation are what? Now, it's important that we're set equal to 0. Like in completing the square, we set equal to constant. Not quadratic formula, we set equal to 0. And so this is done for us, but I'm sure there's going to be some question, like in the next one, it's not set equal to 0. Make sure you do that. And so we know this is A, this is B, this is C. The quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared negative 4ac all over 2 times a. And so now we're going to substitute in our values for a, b, and c. So negative b, now b is 7 here, and so negative b will be negative 7. Now say if b were negative 7, then negative b would be positive 7. It's not that this is always negative, it's just basically that it's the opposite sign of whatever b is here. So opposite sign of b, plus or minus, b squared is going to be 7 squared, and that's going to be 49. Now that number will always be positive, because even if b is negative, it's going to square positive, right? Because everything squares positive. And so then we have a negative 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 3. So opposite sign of the middle term, b, plus or minus, that number squared, so this number squared, and then negative 4, that negative 4 is part of the formula. That's not, has nothing to do with these numbers. That's always there. Times a times c, times first times last. All over, all of it over, not the x equals, but all of this over, the negative b, the plus, all of that over, 2 times a. And that's going to be 2 times our a term, which again is 2. And so let's clean up a couple of things here. That's negative 7 plus or minus the square root of, what you want to do next is not touch the 49. You want to do the negative 4ac part. What's negative 4 times 2 times negative 3? Well, negative 4 times 2 would be negative 8 times negative 3 is positive 24. And notice that that becomes a plus 24, and I'm going to end up with 49 plus 24. And so there's a lot of ways that could go. And also notice that negative 4 is negative, and negative 3 is negative. When 2 out of the 3 of these numbers is negative, it's going to end up being plus, because an even amount of negatives multiply to positive. If this was a positive 3 here, then we'd end up with a negative 24, and we'd be doing 49 minus 24. So you have to be very careful about that one part, and that's where students tend to mess up a lot. And really, you can type in a lot of this into your calculator. You could type in 49, minus 4 times parentheses 2, parentheses negative 3, and it should work out to get you what's going to happen in here. But remember, this is over now 4. 2 times 2 is 4. And so let me clean this up even more. It's going to be negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 49 plus 24 is 73 over 4. And now the question becomes, can I simplify? This is called the discriminant number here. Can I reduce that? And the answer is no. And so my final answer is exactly what I see there, negative 7 plus or minus rad 73 over 4. But that's where the problems are going to change. If it's something that I can simplify, like rad 20, I will. If it's something that's negative, it's going to become something with I, an imaginary number. If it's a square, I'm going to, simplify. So there's a lot of ways the problem could go from there. And then if there's, a number that I could, with our heart, divide all 3 by, after I simplify, and we'll see that come up. But all right, let's do one more. So first of all, I said it's got to set equal to 0 here. So y squared minus 3y minus 9 equals 0. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared negative 4ac all over 2a. And I think you could actually Google quadratic formula song, and you'll find some songs about how to memorize this formula, but I am not going to sing for you on this video. All right, so negative b. Now, b here is negative 3, so that means negative b is positive 3. It's the opposite sign of b. Plus or minus, right? Negative times negative is positive, that kind of thing. And so that rules out this. And it's good to do that sometimes, that while you're doing this, kind of rule out your choices, because that might make the problems easier for you. B squared is negative 3 squared is 9. All right, and that's not from this, that's from b squared. Negative 4 times a is 1. Right, there's a 1 here, so that's not going to do much. Times negative 9 over 2a is 2 times 1, which is just 1. So let's see, that's going to be 3 plus or minus. Now, some people simplify this whole thing. I don't. I keep the b squared term, the 3 there, and I just do this part. Negative 4 times 1 times negative 9 is, again, positive, because I got 2 out of 3 negatives here. That's not going to happen all the time. It just did happen these 2 times. So plus 36 over 2 times 1 is 2. X equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 plus 36 is 45 over 2. And at this point, I think you could probably get the answer, because this answer has an I in it, meaning if this were negative, that's not it. Same thing with this. This has an I in it, implying this is negative. That's not it. We already ruled out C, and so here's the answer, D. And rad 45 does reduce to 3 rad 5. And so I'll just write that again. 3 plus or minus 3 rad 5 over 2, because 45 comes from 9 times 5. Now, it's at this stage that you would look at the heart and see, can I divide all 3 of these numbers? Not the radical number, the coefficient, this term, and this term. Can they all be divided by something? The answer is no, so you know you're done. But that's when you look to simplify. All right, so this is the quadratic formula, and really it's different than completing the square. Completing the square is a procedure that needs to be memorized. This is a formula that needs to be memorized. But after you write it down a couple of times, honestly, it's not that bad, and you'll be fine with it. And if you want, Google it, look up a song.